the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he's my song. And let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he's my song. Yes, you are good. You're good. Oh, you are good. You're good.
Hey. It is so great to be back on the podcast with you. If you're new to the podcast, we are studying through James here at From the Hill. This is the podcast from the ministry team at Hilldale Church of Christ in Clarksville, Tennessee. Our Corona Contrary podcast, our Corona Contrary study, is the one place that you can go without having to worry about hearing how the coronavirus relates to your life, how the coronavirus affects your life, and what all relates to the coronavirus. In fact, we won't say a word about it from this point forward because we are here to give you unfiltered, just pure study of the practical book of James. And so that's what we're doing today. Of course, we know James, he wrote this book as just this practical, just this guide to Christianity without having to make it too complex or without having to complicate it. He, a follower of Christ only after the resurrection, James, the half-brother of Jesus, he is now a pillar in the church, and he writes this really simplistic, easy to read, easy to understand guide to being a Christian. And he writes it in a way that we can all get it. You know, I need something like this. A lot of Paul's writings are so just complex, and they're so I guess they're just so deep, and that's great to have. But sometimes you just need something that you can just chill with. Something that you can just read and let it mirror you, let it bounce off of your life and how it adds up, and just kind of evaluate your own walk with Christ in a very simplistic way. And James, he makes you feel good about it too. He doesn't try to go over your head. It is just something that we can look at and we can know what James means, and we can know in areas of way we might be doing great, in areas where we need to improve upon. So let's dig in. Of course, last time we talked about the sin of partiality, and Travis was with us, and man, he did such a great job of walking us through that. As an experienced minister, he really knows the church. He has a very strong connection with the church, and if you could see him with our young adults, man, he is on fire constantly. He does such a great job around here, and we are just so blessed to have Travis. There's not another Travis out there, and we're going to try to get him on this podcast as much as possible so y'all don't have to listen to me as much, which is always a plus. But you know, last time he brought us through the sin of partiality, and he talked about partiality in the church. And now James, he kind of switches gears really fast on us, and he does that a lot in this book. He kind of goes into different subjects and then just drops them off wherever he feels like it and picks them back up later. It's almost like he had a little pad out, or he had his notes out in his phone, and he thought about something and he wrote it all down real quick, and then he put his notes up and went and lived his life for a little while, and then he saw something else and was like, yeah, I'll write that down too. And so he goes from the sin of partiality to faith without works. And you know, we covered faith without works a little bit earlier in the podcast. We talked about James 1 verses 19 through, I guess it would be around 26. And then it dropped off to the sin of partiality, and now we're back to action. We're back to doing things as active Christians. And this is probably the most controversial part of James, what we're about to study. We're going into chapter 2, verses 14, I guess it'd be through 25 or 26. And early scholars, there was one that called James the straw epistle, and probably because of this. it doesn't go directly in line. It doesn't look like it goes directly in line with stuff that Paul writes, but it really does. And it's just people who look at faith a certain way. They don't understand how James looked at faith. And James and Paul looked at faith in very similar ways, if not the same way. You see, Paul looked at faith as this overall thing in which you would have to believe, in this thing in which you would have so much power in just the mere belief of Christ alone. But you think about who Paul is and who Paul was, and Paul was a person of action anyway, right? Even when he wasn't on God's side, Paul was the guy who was doing everything he could for the religion that he thought was the right one. And then he had to come to Jesus meeting literally on the road to Damascus. And he turned his life around and he believed in Jesus Christ and therefore took action almost immediately, preaching and trying to be in the church and be a part of the church. You see, there's nothing in Paul's life and there's nothing in Paul and his example that would lead anyone who looked at it and anyone who was a student of the word to think that Paul actually meant that all you had to do was believe without action and you would be saved. You see, Paul, he believed, therefore he lived a missionary life for the rest of his life, going through persecution, and was eventually killed in Rome, right? He was eventually killed because of the lifestyle that he lived. Now, that doesn't really scream to me the person that says that all you have to do is believe in God and then you're saved. That doesn't really show that type of person. Instead, Paul was the type of person that he believed in God, therefore he acted on that. Well, James says the same thing, except for James says the quiet part out loud, it seems like. James, he outlines the need for works along with faith, while Paul just showed his works, and he never discounted obedience. Paul never discounted obedience. He never discounted the need to do stuff, but he just showed it. He showed it in what he did, and he enabled and he empowered the people that he wrote to take action. He never just said, y'all just believe and have a good day. No, that's not at all what Paul was about. But this is probably the most controversial part, because people who want to say, well, faith is all you need to be saved, they want to throw out the book of James because of all of the places that it puts faith and action together. And really, Paul does the same thing, but people who don't want to see that are not going to see that. People who want to just take verses out of context are not going to see that. And if the viewership here, if y'all look at it and y'all want a deeper study onto the controversial thing that this really is, if y'all want me to look into and take us through the controversy that isn't there between Paul and James, I'll be more than happy to dive into that with y'all, and we can take a break from the book of James and look at that. But let's look at this dead horse kind of faith that we find ourselves in right here. You see, it'd be kind of like this man. He had the greatest and fastest horse in the world. We can imagine that this horse could just run for days, is faster than any other horse in the world. And he advertises this. He talks about this constantly. He goes to the Kentucky Derby and says, I've got the fastest horse around, and the horse looks magnificent. And he's got these broad shoulders, and he's got legs that can just seem like they just explode off the ground. But the horse won't race. So you've got this great horse, this magnificent, powerful beast of a horse that is better than any other horse, but it won't race. He's not going to win any money at the Kentucky Derby. That horse isn't going to win anything. It might as well be a dead and useless horse if it refuses to go on the racetrack. And this is what we're talking about today, is this dead horse kind of faith that James says doesn't work. So let's dive into chapter 2, verses 14, and we're just going to stop at verse 17 if you want to read with us. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says that he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says, "Go in peace and be warmed and filled," without giving them the things that they need, what good is that? So also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Now, James brings up a very personal picture here. He brings up if one of your close friends, if you're one of your brothers or sisters, a family member, a close friend, a loved one, you see them, I guess the picture I get is sitting in an alley or sitting on the side of a road or on a corner, and they are not well clothed and it's cold outside. I can just see them with a lot of bare skin and the snowflakes swirling around them, and you can see their ribs because they don't have the daily food and water that they need. And they're begging. They need something badly. And the picture that James says is that you go up to this person and you say, I hope you get what you need. I hope you're having a good day. That would be the equivalent of what James was saying there. I hope you're doing well. Then what good is those words to that person? You see, talk is cheap is what James is trying to say here. Talk is cheap. And then he says it outright. He says it outright in verse 17. So also by faith itself, it does not have any works. It is dead. And this is extremely controversial even in the 40s to 60s AD whenever this is first being written, when this is first being talked about. And even in those early days, people were saying that all you had to do is believe. Well, James, he's expecting some objections here. He anticipates some of the same objections that we're going to hear today. You know, one says that faith alone is powerful. It can move mountains. Yes, James is not saying otherwise. One may say that we're supposed to walk by faith and not by sight. Yes, that James is agreeing with that. He is not saying otherwise. And we might even hear today, we are saved by faith and not works. Yes, because we don't have a works-based salvation. See, that's not at all what James is trying to say. And if you read what James is talking about, that's not at all what he is trying to say. But James anticipates this kind of blowback. And James doesn't object to these things, but instead he enforces them. He enforces these kind of things. He says that, yes, faith, you must walk by faith and not by sight. He enforces that we're saved by faith and not by our own works. He even enforces that faith alone, that faith is powerful and it moves mountains. But he kind of anticipates the objections, and he says in verse 18, but someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works. That's what people were trying to do. They were trying to show out their faith and how much they believed in God and how much they believed in Christ apart from doing anything, apart from their works. James says, I will show you my faith by my works. I will show you my faith by my works. And so, it says if you believe that God is one, you do well. Yeah, that's good. But even the demons believe and shudder. Man, it's just so powerful. It's just so extremely powerful. Yes, faith moves mountains, but faith is backed up by action. James, I've got Paul in my mind today for some reason. James says, you show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. What he's saying, faith requires action to be real. Faith without works is not real at all. But faith with works, that is the real thing. Faith with action, that is the real thing. You know, if I have a criminal come in, if I have someone that's trying to rob me, and he says, put your hands up or I'll shoot you, I show him that I have faith that he will shoot me by putting my hands up. right? That's not saying that. You know, I'm not going to try to get out of that situation. But I have faith that if a criminal points a gun in my face and says, if you don't put your hands up, I'm going to shoot you, I have faith that's going to happen if I don't put my hands up. Therefore, I show him that I believe him. I show him that I have faith in that by putting my hands up. And we do the similar thing with action and faith. You see, James then he goes into all of these different examples of faith, and faith that is shown by action. In verse 20, it starts off, "Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart works is useless? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? Did he not have faith?" You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works and not faith alone. And in the same way was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messenger and sent them about another way? For as apart from the Spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. You show faith by action. You look through all of this. You look through all of this in Hebrews 11, the Hall of Fame of faith, and it's all of these people who had action. It's all these people who showed action. It's not anyone who just said, well, yes, they believed and they didn't do anything. If you have faith, then you show it by action. You see, faith is actually life-changing. I think everybody listening is going to agree with this. Faith is life-changing because if you believe that there's a God, it affects how you live your day-to-day life. It affects how you do religion. It affects how you do your job. It reflects how you treat your family. It reflects how you pick your friends. It reflects what you do on a day-to-day basis. Because if I have faith, if I believe that there is a God, then I do what that God says. Then I act in the way that God would have me to act. Especially when we get to have faith in such a loving Father and such a powerful, loving, and good God. We get to have that kind of faith in Him, and then He rewards us. He is such a being that He could say, have faith in me or die. Believe in me and do what I tell you to do or die. But instead, He rewards us by saying, now, whatever you do, whenever you have faith in me, it's going to work out best for you. I want the best for you. Now, you as a listener, you can think about this in an extremely personal way because Christianity is extremely personal. Christianity is extremely personal because when we have faith in our Father who is good, our life turns out better. We get better results from our friends. We get better results for how we treat our family. We get better results for how we do in our relationships because we filter everything that we have through our faith in Jesus Christ because that is the action that He requires you to have. Not only is He requiring you to have action as far as what you do on a day-to-day basis, He requires you to have action on how you live your life, what you don't do, and how you pray to Him, how you read His Word, how you communicate with Him, how you communicate with others. Everything that you do is now filtered through this faith that you have in Jesus Christ. And that is what He requires of us. Now, in our next one, we're talking about taming the tongue. Our faith in Jesus Christ helps us with that. We talk about action and taking the first step out of the boat and walking towards Christ in faith. Faith helps us with that. We have faith that God is going to take care of us. Therefore, we do the things that allow us to be better people, be better Christians because of our faith. By faith, Abraham did this. By faith, Rahab did this. It's by faith that we do anything, that we take action. It is by faith that we work out our salvation with Christ. By faith, because we believe a certain thing, we do a certain thing. That's what this means. We have faith in God, and therefore we can have faith that He's going to take care of us. But we have to show that faith by our actions. My prayer for us this week as we go into the weekend is that we look for ways to filter our actions, to filter our lifestyle through our faith in Jesus Christ. That's the challenge I give to myself. That's the challenge that I give to you as we sign off today. Thank you all so much for being a part of what we're doing here at From the Hill and from the ministry team at Hilldale Church of Christ. Be blessed and show Christ in some way today. Thank you very much.
Of my heart, be the mountain where I run, the fountain I'll drink from.
If you've enjoyed this episode of From the Hill, we invite you to please give us a 5-star review and share it with your friends. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to email me, your host, Harris, the youth minister, at harris@hilldalecc.org. That's harris@hilldalecc.org. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Be blessed and show Christ in some way today.